Hello, on this video I'm going to talk a little bit about linked lists. Before that, let's talk about array just for a little bit. Array is a data structure that has multiple locations and you can store some kind of data in each location. And an array, once you create an array, is a fixed size. You cannot change it. And you can also create a pointer, and with this pointer you can point to the different places in the array and you can access those data in an array. The linked list is different because each node on a linked list will have a data and also have a pointer to the next node. So your linked list will be something like this, and if you need another node, then you do copy and create another pointer. And if you need another node, you do the same, create everything over, and you just add one more node. So the main difference between a linked list and an array is that the linked list starts at 0 and you can add more nodes as you need. The disadvantage of the linked list is that it is a sequential access. So if you need to access the fourth node, you must go through the first node to the second, third, and fourth. So let's write some code then. I'm going to start the program from a Hello World program. If you don't know how to create a Hello World program, just watch one of my previous videos, and there I teach you how to create a console project and how to get to a Hello World. So the first thing is to create a node class. So let's create a class. And this class is going to be very simple for now. We're going to have only two things in this class. It's going to be an integer, any data you want, and we're going to have a pointer, and this pointer is going to point to another node. So because of that, we're going to create a node pointer. We're going to call it next, and this is going to be pointing to the next node. Data is the integer, and next is going to be this pointer that we're going to point to the next node. So each node is going to be an instance of the class node. So I'm creating this very simple, only for learning purpose. Now, going back to the main file, I'm going to include the node class, and now we can start coding the node. So node, I'm going to name this as root equals new node. So on this line here, all it does is to create this first node, and the first node is always called the root. Now let's put some data into that node. So root, and in order to access the members of the node class and to access the data inside the class, we're going to use this operator, the pointer operator. So root, and if you remember, there were two things that we were interested on. One was the data, and the other one was the next. So let's set up the data for now. So the data for this one, I'm gonna set to 10. It doesn't really matter. Now we cannot set the next yet because the next node is not there yet. This is what we have now. We have data equals 10, and pointer that points to next is pointing nowhere. And the reason it's pointing nowhere is because there is nowhere to point yet. So let's create another node so we can point that to. So right here, line 12, what we just did is that we created another node, and let's set that to 20. And that node also has a pointer, but it's pointing to nowhere. Let's set to 20 first. So root, node 1, and the data equals 20. The next thing to do is to get the root pointer next to point to our next node. We want something like this now. So root, and we have something over there called next is going to be equals the node 1. So line 15 now makes the connection from root to node 1. So this is your root node 1, just for clarification. But if you notice that node 1 pointer is pointing to nowhere, well, that's because there is no next node. So let's create another node. So node 2, and let's set the node 2 data to some value. So node 2, the data is going to be 30 for this one. Now I have something like this, and the pointer from node 1 is pointing to nowhere, as well as node 2 pointer is pointing to nowhere. So now let's get the connection here. Let's connect the node 1 pointer to the node 2. So node next equals node 2. So line 20 is a connection between node 1 and node 2. And node 2 pointer is pointing nowhere. We can repeat this process and create many nodes. Now, how do you access the data though? So let's print some of the data. So first right here, let's print the data from root. And I print the data, and then this prints me 10. Good. Now how do we print the data from node 1? Well, we can do the same thing. We can change this to node 1, and node 1 data will print the data from node 1, which is 20. And if we do the same thing node 2, then now we have 30. Now, what if I don't know the names of the node 1 and node 2. If I don't, then I can still access that, because if you remember, there's a pointer from root to node 1, and then node 1 has also a pointer to node 2. Because of that, we can also do the same thing as line 22 and 23, but without using the node 1 and node 2. So let's try to do that. So instead of accessing the data, now I'm going to use the pointer. And the pointer, if you guys remember, is called next. Now root.next now is not referring to this node, it's referring to this node here. And if you want to access the data from this node, we just put the data. So root next data. So line 22 now does exactly the same work as line 24. So line 22 prints the 20. And if you already have right here the node number 1, then node number 1 contains the pointer to node number 2. And because of that, we can use the same idea and access the data from node number 3. So let's try this. So instead of putting data, I'm going to use the next and then data. So when you say root, it's the first node, root next is the node number 1, and root next is node number 2. So 10, 20, and 30. Now, why I took so long to explain this? The idea here is that once you know the root of a linked list, you can access any member only by using the pointers. So you do not need to know the names of every single node on the linked list. And that's very important, because although this is a linked list, it is very clumsy. We want to write a class to control that for us, and then the client or the main program only has to create a linked list data type, and then either add or subtract or search or modify or empty or delete the linked list. And that is going to be done on the next video.